Welcome to tonight's Bhagavad-gītā lecture about Bhagavad-gītā 4.24 featuring Sutapa Prabhu. He is a recurring guest. He has been on our program before, and he will be speaking about Bhagavad-gītā 4.25. Yeah, take it away.
Thank you, Prabhu. I can't remember. Do you normally sing Radha Madhava? Should I sing or should I just speak?
Well, you can sing, but as you know, with Zoom, you wouldn't be hearing us. So yeah, but you can, of course.
Okay.
And should I make you co-host? Are you sharing anything?
Yeah, that would be good if you can make me co-host.
Okay.
I'll just sing for a few minutes and then we'll...
Okay.
You can sing behind your muted mics. That would be nice. Hare Krishna. Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari, Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari, Gopijana Vallabha Girivardhari, Gopijana Vallabha Girivardhari, Yashodanandana Braja Janaranjana, Yashodanandana Braja Janaranjana, Yamuna Tira Vanachari, Yamuna Tira Vanachari, Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari, Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Gaura Hari Bol, Nitai Gaura Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Gaura Hari Bol, Jaya Jaya Prabhupada, 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 Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada, 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 Jaya Prabhupada. Jai Shri Radha Madhava. Nice to see everyone. Thank you for the opportunity to be with you again. So yeah, today we're reading from Bhagavad-gītā 4.24. So I kind of, like I normally do, I try to share some thoughts with you, and would very much welcome any comments and questions that you have, and it's nice to have a discussion in this format with all you wonderful Vaishnavas. So I'll just share my screen. I'm sure you all have a Gita with you, but if you don't, then I'm just putting the verse up here on the screen. So you can also follow it here if you'd like to. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So we're reading from chapter number 4 of Srila Prabhupada's Bhagavad-gītā As It Is, and we're reading from text number 24. It's a very beautiful, very poetic verse, and let's see what we can get from it today. So Sanskrit as follows. Brahmārpaṇaṁ, havir, brahmagnau, brahmāṇā, hutam, brahmaiva, tena, gantavyam, brahma-karma-samādhinā. Once more. Brahmārpaṇaṁ, havir, brahmagnau, brahmāṇā, hutam, brahmaiva, tena, gantavyam, brahma-karma-samādhinā. So I'll go straight into the translation and the purport, and then we'll take it from there. A person who is fully absorbed in Krishna consciousness is sure to attain the spiritual kingdom because of his full contribution to spiritual activities, in which the consummation is absolute, and that which is offered is of the same spiritual nature. Purport. How activities in Krishna consciousness can lead one ultimately to the supreme goal is described here. There are various activities in Krishna consciousness, and all of them will be described in the following verses. But for the present, just the principle of Krishna consciousness is described. A conditioned soul entangled in material contamination is sure to act in the material atmosphere, and yet he has to get out of such an environment. The process by which the conditioned soul can get out of the material atmosphere is Krishna consciousness. For example, a patient who is suffering from a disorder of the bowels due to overindulgence in milk products is cured by another milk product, namely yogurt. The material absorbed conditioned soul can be cured by Krishna consciousness as set forth here in the Gita. This process is generally known as yajna, or activities, sacrifices simply meant for the satisfaction of Vishnu or Krishna. The more the activities of the material world are performed in Krishna consciousness or for Vishnu only, the more the atmosphere becomes spiritualized by complete absorption. The word brahma-karma-samādhinā means spiritual. The Lord is spiritual, and the rays of his transcendental body are called Brahma-jyoti, his spiritual effulgence. Everything that exists is situated in that Brahma-jyoti, but when the jyoti is covered by illusion, maya, or sense gratification, it is called material. This material veil can be removed at once by Krishna consciousness. Thus, the offering for the sake of Krishna consciousness, the consuming agent of such an offering or contribution, the process of consumption, the contributor, and the result are all combined together, Brahman, or the absolute truth. The absolute truth covered by Maya is called matter. Matter dovetailed for the course of the absolute truth regains its spiritual quality. Krishna consciousness is the process of converting the illusory consciousness into Brahman, or the Supreme. When the mind is fully absorbed in Krishna consciousness, it is said to be in samadhi or trance. Anything done in transcendental consciousness is called yajna, or sacrifice for the absolute. In that condition of spiritual consciousness, the contributor, the contribution, the consumption, the performer or leader of the performance, and the result or ultimate gain, everything becomes one in the absolute, the Supreme Brahman. That is the method of Krishna consciousness. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Magyānatimirandasya jnananjana shalakaya chakshurunmilitam yena tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupakada Mayham Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Padakamalan Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunathanvitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakhanvitamscha He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vancha Kalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya Eva Cha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shri Vasadi Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. I'll just share with you my screen and maybe some thoughts as we begin discussing. So we are into the chapter 4 of the Bhagavad-gītā, and many of you are familiar that the Bhagavad-gītā is split up into 3 sections. So as we know, there is the first 6 chapters of the Bhagavad-gītā, and then there are the middle 6, 7 to 12. Oops. And then there are the final 6, 13 to 18. Traditionally, in the Sanskrit breakdown, the first 6 are known as karma yoga. Yeah, you're all familiar with this. Then the middle is known as bhakti yoga. And the final 6 are known as jnana yoga. The acharyas give many commentaries and many reasons why bhakti is situated in the middle. The essence is always in the middle. The most valuable thing is in the middle. But to be honest, Krishna hints at bhakti everywhere throughout the Gita, although in the middle 6 chapters it becomes very, very prominent. If we were to put this in modern day terminology, then you could describe it like this. The first 6 chapters teach you about how to live. The middle 6 chapters teach you about how to love. And the final 6 chapters teach you how to leave. And that's one way in which you can see the progression of the Gita. What Krishna is doing in the first 6 chapters is he's basically explaining about how to live in this world, how to have a job, how to have a family, how to function in the environment around you. But instead of living in this world and becoming entangled, how to live in this world, how to do your action, which is karma, but how to connect it to God, which is yoga. And when you do karma yoga, and when you do everything as a yajna or a sacrifice, then Krishna says in the Gita, Yagyarthat karmano nyatra loko yam karma bandhana. If you do work as a sacrifice for Vishnu, if you live in this world by connecting it, then you'll never bandhana, you'll never get entangled. So that's basically what the first 6 chapters of the Gita are dealing with, how to live in the world. But of course, we don't want to just live in the world free of having reactions. That's nice. That ensures we don't get involved in karmic complexity. But the ultimate point of life is to learn to love, because everyone wants to love and be loved. And therefore, Krishna then goes on in the middle to talk about how that love awakens and how ultimately when we repose our loving spirit in Krishna, then by loving Krishna or the root of the tree, automatically we develop love for everyone and everything else. And then some people ask, why doesn't the Gita just end? Like, if Krishna already taught you how to, like, love is the end, like, why do we need to discuss anything else? But then what Krishna does in the second or the final part of the Gita is he talks about how to leave. In other words, in this chapter, he gives many aspects of knowledge pertaining to detachment. In the 15th chapter, for example, he talks about the banyan tree of the material world and how we have to remain detached from it. He talks about the modes of nature and ensuring that we don't again become entangled in the influences of the world around us. And then finally, the 18th chapter is ultimately titled The Perfection of Renunciation. So Krishna kind of caps the Bhagavad-gītā with giving knowledge which will help you to ultimately leave this world without having any sense of attachment to this world. And in that way, the Bhagavad-gītā is the complete presentation on how to live a perfect life, because it tells you how to live in this world. It tells you how to ultimately develop love. And then ultimately, it tells you how to remain detached in your journey through this world, and ultimately then how to leave in perfect consciousness. Because Krishna says, Antakale chamameva smaran muktva kalevaram, that whatever you remember, whatever consciousness you have at the time of death, that is what you will ultimately attain. So this is basically, let me begin today as we talk about the 24th verse of chapter 4 by framing this, saying in these chapters, Krishna is telling us how to live in the world. Now, in this verse, Krishna is saying something very, very amazing. He's basically saying that when you engage in activity which is spiritually aimed, then everything becomes spiritualized. For example, sometimes when we have an initiation, we do a yajna, right? So then in a yajna, you have someone who's sitting behind the fire, and what are they doing? They're putting different items into the fire. The fire, as items are put into the fire is getting bigger. And all of those items going into the fire are offered with mantras, ultimately to the Supreme Lord, because it said that the fire, Yajna Vai Vishnu, the fire is Vishnu's mouth. So if you can, in your mind, go back to a time when you've been in an initiation yajna, then basically this is the point that Krishna is making in the verse. That if you picture in your mind a yajna, a sacrifice, then basically what Krishna is saying in this verse is, while this sacrifice is going on, all of the items that are going into the fire become spiritualized. The fire itself becomes spiritualized. The priest who is facilitating the whole yajna to go on, that person is becoming spiritualized because he's facilitating spiritual activity. And the person who is offering the items into the fire, that person becomes spiritualized because ultimately they're getting all the spiritual benefit of doing that and ultimately develop spiritual consciousness. And that's basically what this verse is saying, that when something is done with a spiritual motivation, in a spiritual way, according to the guidance of spiritual wisdom, then everything becomes spiritualized and there's no longer any reactions. Prabhupada said, when you act and you engage material things, this material body and material objects, in the service of the Lord, the material objects and the material body become spiritualized. They're no longer material things. Because Prabhupada gave the example that when you put a rod, an iron rod into fire, then it becomes just like fire. Like, for example, Prabhupada once went to a temple and then he went into the basement where the printing press was. And the printing press is basically printing all of these amazing books that would be shared with people for spiritual upliftment. And as Prabhupada got down into the basement and he saw the machines, the printing machines, Prabhupada paid full dandavats to the machines. He paid obeisances to the machines. I don't know in your life if you've ever seen anyone pay dandavats to a machine, but Prabhupada did. And he said, because the machines are being fully utilized for the upliftment of society, the machines have become spiritualized. In fact, Prabhupada said these printing machines are a modern day incarnation of Vyasadeva. So you'll never look at a printing machine in the same way. If it's printing Prabhupada's books, it's a modern day incarnation of Vyasadeva. The machine, the sound of the machine, you know, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, he was totally into like printing and printing machines. And you know what he did in one of his temples? He installed a printing press right next to the deities. So right next to where the deities were, there was a printing press. And let me tell you, the printing presses of the early 1900s were not quiet. They were super noisy. And Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur was so intent on printing that he would print around the clock, even at nighttime. So one person once came to him and said, you know, Guru Maharaj, people are complaining because the deities are taking rest. And there's just this noisy machine going on of the printing. Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur looked back at this disciple and said, the sound of this printing press is like a sweet, melodious kirtan. So I don't know if everyone could perceive it in that way, but Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur did. He said, this is not a material sound. This is not a material machine. This is not a material activity, because it's all done for the upliftment of the world and for spreading Krishna's name, fame, form, and glories. Everything has become spiritualized. Once Prabhupada was in a brahmacharya ashram. I'm seeing Jainataya Prabhu there. He lived in a brahmacharya ashram for a long time, so he knows what it's like. You know, like everyone has their locker, you know, so you'll have like this locker. Half the time, you know, the door's broken and there's all these kind of stickers on it from like the last 40 years of devotees who used the locker. And one time Prabhupada came into brahmacharya ashram and he knocked one of the lockers, like he just kind of knocked it on the, you know, like just knocked the locker, and he said, this locker is pure spirit. He said, it's pure spirit. And everyone's thinking like, that's like a locker in the brahmacharya ashram. It's like the door's broken on that locker. Prabhupada said, it's pure spirit because it's being used entirely for Krishna. Even, for example, microphones, isn't it? Like one time Prabhupada was giving a lecture, so the microphone was kind of, you know, like ISKCON microphone stands like never work. I don't know, like they always like go down. Like even maybe it's humility, I don't know, like all of the microphone stands in ISKCON, like they always go down, like Trinada piece. So they never work. So one time the microphone was coming down. Anyway, there was this new devotee who had just taken his Brahmin initiation. And, you know, like when you take Brahmin initiation, you know, the men get a thread, you know. So like, it's the pride, you know, you got your thread. So it's like the pride of your life to have a Brahmin thread. So he was feeling very good. And as Prabhupada was about to begin giving the lecture, the microphone stand was going down. So he looked at this new devotee who had just taken Brahmin initiation and he said, take off your Brahmin thread. He was like, I just got it from you, Prabhupada. He said, no, take off your Brahmin thread. So he took off his Brahmin thread and Prabhupada took the Brahmin thread and he tied it around the microphone just to hold it up. He's thinking like, that's my Brahmin thread. That's like sacred. But Prabhupada was making the point that the microphone is also sacred because the microphone is being used to share the name, fame, form, qualities of the Lord. And therefore, it's just as sacred as your Brahmin thread. So, you know, don't worry, it's going to good use. So these are all examples of how when we engage with the material world, but we engage with it in a spiritual way, actually, although externally those things look the same, they're not the same because they're being used completely for Krishna. And the effect that those things have on us is completely different because we're using them in a spiritual way. And I'm going to open up something with all of you today, which I think, you might be able to relate to. And I basically want to share with you, like, the Bhagavad-gītā gives 3 different visions of how people approach the world and approach everything in the world. And it's very, very, I think it's a very, very powerful concept. So I hope you can see my screen. So basically, broadly speaking, there are 3 types of approaches to the world. Either you look at the world, some people look away from the world, and some people look beyond the world. And these are the 3 basic visions of the world that Krishna gives in the Gita. And we'll be able to see ourselves, our own life, as we begin to discuss this. Yeah? Okay, so let me just explore a little bit. What do I mean by this? Someone who's looking at the world, they're basically someone who is in material life, someone who is trying to enjoy, someone who's seeing everything in the world as an object of their enjoyment. And therefore, when they go out on the street, they see a car, they think, I would like a car like that, or I'd like a partner like that, or I'd like a donut like that. It's just everything they see is basically just for their own enjoyment. And even when we come to spiritual life, we can have some level of this, that we come to spiritual life, but we're looking at everything in the Krishna consciousness movement as an object of our enjoyment. I want to be in a kirtan so I can enjoy it. I want to come to the Sunday feast so I can enjoy the prasadam, the prasadam at the end of the program. So one basic vision of the world is when we look at the world. This is when we look at the world as an object of enjoyment. Let me just open up all of these. So basically, when we're looking at the world, we have an attachment to the world. Now, later on, when we get some level of knowledge in Krishna consciousness, then we come to the level of gyan. And it doesn't always go like in a sequence, but generally it does actually. So we get some knowledge that, if you try to enjoy this world, then this world doesn't bring any enjoyment. You'll just be miserable. And then what happens is our vision of the world tends to become one of detachment. Have you noticed, like in early spiritual life, when we get knowledge, we look at everything and we just think everything is Maya. Like, my family is Maya, my job's Maya, everything on the news is Maya, just Maya, Maya, Maya. I have nothing to do with it. I don't want anything to do with it. I just want to get out of this world. And every time I engage with everything and everyone in this world, it just drags me down into material consciousness. So in early spiritual life, we tend to be like this. The mood is one of very much a mood of detachment. But later on, in mature spiritual life, when we hear and develop more of a sense of bhakti, then we're not attached to the things of this world. We're not really detached from the things of this world, but rather we look at all of the things in this world as an object which we can engage in Krishna's service. And that is the mature point that we have to reach. This verse that we're reading today, 4:24, is very much about this. Krishna is saying that if you learn to engage everything in spiritual life that you have, everything you have in material life for a spiritual purpose, then everything becomes spiritualized. And so this is what it means to look beyond the world. It means you're functioning in the world, you're functioning with everything around you, but your vision is beyond, and you're using everything in this world as a bridge to get to that world. Yeah? So what's the goal of those who look at the world? They want to enjoy the world. What's the goal of those who want to who are looking away from the world, they want to escape the world. Anyone want to guess? What's the goal of someone who's looking beyond the world? You can put it on the chat. If you can come up with a word that describes those who are trying to go beyond the world. If someone looking at the world is trying to enjoy the world, if someone looking away from the world is trying to escape the world, Sumit says someone who's looking beyond the world is trying to serve the world. Okay, yeah, that's good. Yeah, Janithai Lekashavanti says we're trying to see Krishna everywhere. Yeah, serve. Yeah, you got it, basically. Service. That's the point. Yeah. We're looking to serve the world. We're looking at everything as an opportunity to serve. And therefore, Rupa Goswami describes this principle as yukta vairagya. Prapanchakataya buddhya harisambandhu vastuna mumukshubi parityago falgu vairagya katyate. So what Rupa Goswami basically says in this verse, he says, Prapanchakataya buddhya. There are many, many objects in this world. Hari sambandha vastuna. And each one of those objects have their connection to Hari, to the Lord. Mumukshubi parityago. But if you don't know what the Hari sambandha is, if you don't know how to connect those things, how to use those things in service to Krishna, and mumukshubi parityago, you give them up, thinking this is Maya. Falgu vairagya katyate. Your renunciation is said to be like that of a monkey. Is false renunciation. The goal of spiritual life is not to renounce things. The goal of spiritual life is to use everything in Krishna's service. And so from a philosophical point of view, the dialectic of each one of these is that in the beginning, we try, our thesis, our idea is that we'll try to enjoy this world. But then we try to enjoy the world and it doesn't work out because we end up miserable. So then we try to walk away from the world. That's the antithesis. But when we walk away from the material world, we may feel some freedom from reaction, but we don't feel fulfillment of the heart. And therefore, the synthesis is when we engage in bhakti. And for someone, even who's a believer, when they're very much looking at the world and trying to enjoy the world, then their vision of God is that either God doesn't exist or they see that God is there, but he's just my order supplier. In other words, their practice and goal of spirituality is very, very self-centered. When one is trying to escape the world, then their vision of God or the absolute truth is an impersonal one. And only when we're engaging in service, developing bhakti, and using everything for a higher purpose can we really connect with God as a person. And so the result of the first two is that ultimately you'll be frustrated. Whether you're attached to the world or whether you become detached from the world, ultimately both will frustrate you. Therefore, even Srila Prabhupada quotes the Bhagavatam, Yenye ravindaksha vimuktamaninas tvayasya bhavat avishuddha buddhaya. There are those impersonalists who think they are liberated, but patantyado, they will again fall from their position because they haven't fulfilled their heart. And only real satisfaction can come when we learn to use everything we have around us in Krishna consciousness. And therefore, this is very much the theme of Bhagavad-gītā 4:24 that we're reading today. That the goal of life is not to enjoy things around us, is not to walk away from things around us, but rather to engage the things around us in the service of the Lord. And in that way, this is the mature stage of spiritual life. What's the result of going beyond? You get satisfaction. Yeah. you feel happiness and satisfaction. So this is very much the goal. And you know, our acharyas gave us something so practical. It's not only practical, but it's the highest thing. It's so practical to engage in acts of bhakti by which you engage things in Krishna's service. But not only is it practical, it's the highest thing because it ultimately awakens that real satisfaction within the heart. Yeah, satisfaction. So I would prefer, rather than speaking more, to have a conversation about this and see whether any of you have any reflections or thoughts or comments, or anything you would like to, you want me to share it once more? Okay. It's here, you can see it. Yeah, so yeah, I wonder whether any of you, would you have any comments or questions or clarifications, or maybe if you want to build on any of these points, then we can kind of go in that direction. And have a bit more of a discussion. So yeah, you can unmute yourself if you have a question you'd like to ask or some comment to make.
Yeah, I have a question or...
Yeah, Jai Nitaipu, Hare Krishna.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's very nice and important. But I wonder, like, it sounds kind of theoretical. I mean, like, this is a theory. So what is relevant for us to really experience like that? You know, to really have this desire to serve whatever we see, to engage it in Krishna's service, or like Prabhupada was describing in the purport that everything becomes spiritualized by the consciousness. So yes, and this might be interesting also, like what is
on a practical level. Yeah, thank you, Jai Nitaipu, for raising that. Prabhupada has a really nice quote. He says, this material life is like a block of hardwood, and one has to carve Krishna out of it. And I like that quote very, very much, because carving Krishna out of hardwood is like a step-by-step process. It's very intricate. It involves like small bits of work in different places over a long time, and then you end up with something very, very wonderful. And I think that's basically the approach we have to have towards life. Sometimes I think we try to make a big change, but many, many small changes will ultimately create a big change in our consciousness. This is interesting quote. I think it's from Zuckerberg. He says, either him or Bill Gates, one of them. They say, we overestimate what we can do in a month, but we underestimate what we can do in a year. And it's a very interesting kind of concept, because it's like, whenever we want to make a change, we're just thinking like, okay, that's it, I'm going to wrap it up. Like 1 month, transform my life, like everything's going to get, you know, and because we want it instantaneously. But sometimes when it comes to longer term, we can actually achieve quite a lot if we have a sustained practice. And so I think when we're moving from this kind of dialectic of number one, trying to enjoy the world, and then number two, feeling very distant and disconnected from the world, and then ultimately we're trying to come back into the world but engage it in a spiritual way, I think when we're going along this journey, it has to be done bit by bit. So it's almost like you gotta work on your life bit by bit. It's like interesting, like when you put a puzzle, like I don't know when you were a kid if you ever had like puzzles, you know. So when you put a jigsaw puzzle together, then you generally never do it like in a systematic way. It's like you build up like 4 or 5 pieces go together and you're like, okay, I got that bit done. And then you get another 4 or 5 pieces which are on another side of the puzzle. and then you get another 4 or 5 pieces which are here, and then gradually over time all of those things come together. And so I think we have to build our life like that. Like there'll be times in life when you need to work on your career. There'll be times in life when you need to work on spiritualizing your family life. There'll be times in your life when you just need to develop sadhana and just work on your spiritual practices a lot. And at different times in your life, you may need to focus on different things. And so I guess what I would, my kind of practical suggestion is that rather than trying to overhaul your life and kind of make it this spiritually perfect thing all in one go, systematically work on different things, and then eventually it all comes together and you find you have a very, very Krishna conscious lifestyle. So many small changes will bring about a big change. And maybe that's something more achievable that we can look at. So I always find when Prabhupada said that, you know, that this material life is like hardwood and you have to carve Krishna out of it. Just in your mind's eye, if you think of someone who's a sculptor, it's like a painstaking thing. They can't just go like boom, 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 finished. It's such a intricate, painstaking thing which takes a lot of patience. And I think life is like that. It's just like every day you're fine-tuning it a little bit more, learning how to connect everything in your life to Krishna, and carving a beautiful life where everything connects to the spiritual cause. So yeah, one French writer, he says, self-realization is not when there's nothing more to add. He says, is when there's nothing artificial left to take away. He calls it destructive enlightenment. So basically, he's making the point that spiritual realization is about taking away all the things in your life, or not taking away, but transferring all the things in your life that don't contribute to your spiritual goal, and making them contribute to your spiritual goals, so that everything in your life is eventually connected. And once everything in your life is connected, then you're brahmārpaṇaṁ, havir, brahmagnau. That's what this verse is saying. Everything is spiritualized. I don't know if that helps, Chenitai. Maybe have some reflection yourself on that.
Yeah, I think that helps very much. Yeah. I was just, I had this basic idea, of course, of having better sadhana, work on the things we are basically doing, but this perspective that it's not about a month, or it's about the year or the whole lifetime. I think this is very important. And yeah, of course, everybody who does it for some time, we get some realization about it. Still a lot of hard work to see, but still we can see how the wood is changing. Huh? It's not, and actually it's sorry?
No, I was just going to say, it's like an interesting thing, because like sometimes we look at things like our material situation or our job or our family life, or whatever it may be, certain things of the material world, and we just think, because of the knowledge we've got, we just think like, oh God, it's such a waste of time, all this stuff is so temporary. But the reality is that some effort, if you put into those things and you craft them in a very nice way, they ultimately become a great support for your spiritual practices, and they give you that space and opportunity to really delve deeper into your sadhana. So it's just about having that mature vision that even though certain things of this world are in one sense material and transitory, if I give time and energy to them, then ultimately, like nowadays I do like hopefully I'll be able to maintain it. When you say something like this, you can never maintain it. But I do like, 20, 25 minutes of exercise every day. And it's like, my conclusion is that even if 20 minutes of exercise, if it gives me like 6 months extra in the world, then I've saved time, actually. If it gives me 6 months of an extra longer life, then it is worth the time. So sometimes investing in the lifestyle, investing in your certain aspects of your material life is also important for your spiritual practice as well. Yeah. Thank you. Don't know if anyone else has any comments or questions or anything they would like to ask.
There's a comment in the chat box.
Oh, there's a comment.
Yeah.
Okay. So the question is, I would like to know if there is a way to somehow measure the grade of spiritualization. Can you know if your attempts to use something in Krishna's service actually worked as planned? Okay, that's a very nice question. In the 11th canto of the Bhagavatam, there's a really nice verse which explains the effect of spiritualizing and serving Krishna. Bhakti pareshanubhavo viraktir anyatra chaisha trika eka kalaha prapadyamanasya yathashnatashus tusti pusti shud apayonubhasham. Okay, since we're on Zoom, maybe I'll just I'll just bring it up for you because I think yeah, maybe it's interesting for you. Okay. So this is coming in the conversation between the Nava-yogendras and Nimi. So the analogy is given of eating. That when you eat, basically 3 things happen. When you eat, you experience pleasure, you experience nourishment and energization of your body, and you feel relief from hunger. So we experience this every day. Every day when you have a meal, you feel it's nice, it's good for the palate, you feel energy in your body, and after the meal, you feel like, I don't want to eat anymore. So this analogy is basically given by the Nava-yogendras, and they're saying that similarly, when you serve the Lord, if you're actually using things, trying to spiritualize them by using them in the service of the Lord, then you should experience these 3 things. Devotion, you should feel a very warm feeling of pleasure in your heart. Just as when you feel pleasure when you eat. When you serve Krishna, you should feel happy. If you're actually serving Krishna selflessly, you will feel happy. You'll feel devotion. The second thing you should experience is the Lord. You should actually feel the presence of the Lord. Just as you feel energized when you eat, you should feel a direct experience of the Supreme Lord. And just as when you eat, you feel like you don't want to eat anything more, when you actually engage in devotional service, then you should feel detachment from other things. Yeah? So basically, if you want to know whether your attempts to spiritualize your life, your attempts to serve Krishna, your attempts to do something and dedicate it to Krishna are actually being done in a pure way and being accepted by Krishna, then basically these are the things you should experience. You should experience a feeling of happiness and pleasure and devotion in the heart, number 1. Number 2, you should feel that you are directly interacting with Krishna. You should feel Krishna's presence. You should be able to see how Krishna is acting in your life and how Krishna has become active towards you because he's seeing that you've become active towards him. And the third thing is your attraction for material things should be declining more and more and more. So this is a very, very kind of practical analogy. If you want to measure whether your devotional service is actually being conducted in the right spirit, and whether it's actually being accepted by Krishna. It's a very kind of a practical analogy that's given like that. I hope that helps. Thank you. Anyone else have any questions, comments? Maybe have some practical consideration of anything that we've talked about?
Hare Krishna, Sutapa Prabhu, please accept my humble obeisances. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. You said when the aim is spiritual, every activity is spiritualized. When I have to make life decisions, because, for instance, I now leave a non-devotee partnership and I go closer to devotees. And I'm not sure what is the right position in Krishna consciousness for me now. When my aim is to come closer to Krishna, to come closer to good service for Krishna and to love for Krishna, is it maybe that that every decision is right when I have this in mind?
Thank you so much. Yeah, decision making is so difficult because whenever we make decisions, we're wondering whether it's the right decision, the wrong decision. There's always some element of uncertainty. And you know, sometimes it's not necessarily also a question of right and wrong. Those decisions are actually much easier, but the decisions which are difficult are the decisions where there could be many right answers in their own way. And so how to know which answer to take. Therefore, more important than the decision that you make is the process that you go through to make the decision. And so the three principles that you should generally apply when you want to make a decision is, number one, try to understand the situation, the decision, the options, and the effects of those decisions through the eyes of Shastra. That's our first reference point. That what does Shastra say about this? Now, Shastra is not going to tell you what you should do, you know, in every certain family situation, but what Shastra will give you is principles. And so the first thing we should meditate on when we're looking to make any decision is what principles of Shastra would help me in this situation to understand what direction I should take. So that's our first reference point. But then the second thing we do after that is, after making some kind of consideration based on our understanding, the second thing we do is we consult the Vaishnavas. And then you have Shiksha Gurus, you have Diksha Guru, you have other sadhus who you speak to, who also may give you some extra advice. And then the third thing that you do is ultimately you make a prayer to Krishna. That I've tried to understand through Guru Sadhu Shastra, and now I go in this direction, and we make a prayer to Krishna and offer that decision to him. And then ultimately, whatever happens after that, you can rest assured that you are protected because you made the decision in the right way. Sometimes we make a decision and then later on, you know, like 1 week or 1 month after the decision, we try to like decipher whether was it the right decision, was it the wrong decision. And to be honest, we'll never know what the right and wrong decision is, because the right decision, sometimes after you make the right decision, all hell can break loose and it can be like complete chaos. but it may actually be the right decision because long term, it leads you to the place where Krishna wants to take you. So the thing is, you can never actually tell what is the right decision because Krishna is always many, many steps ahead of us. We don't know. But the one thing we can be sure of is, did I go through the right process to make the decision? And basically, this is Bhagavad-gītā, because the best thing that Arjuna did in the whole of the Gita is that when he was confused, when he didn't know what to do, and when he was basically in a dilemma, then what did he do? He went to Krishna and he said, Shishyasteham sadhimam tvam prapannam. And that was it. Like, in one sense, when Arjuna went in front of Krishna in that spirit, his life was surely going to now be successful because he had made the decision to now go about making a decision in the right way by taking guidance. So yeah, this is how we should approach life. And yeah, it's so difficult. Every moment we're making decisions, and we can become very, very confused. And I think a lot of the time we live in the past as well, thinking, should I have made that decision? Maybe that was the wrong decision. Why did I do that? But when we go through the right process of decision making, then our mind can be peaceful, because then we know Krishna will definitely back me up. So yeah, that's that. I don't know if that helps.
Thank you very much for your excellent answer. It's really nice. Krishna sends me a lot of processes to make the right decision. And I'm right now doing Bhakti Shastri course, and we are right in the first chapter of the Bhagavad-gītā, Arjuna's confusion.
Yeah, definitely. And you know, it becomes quite natural actually to go through this process of decision making because you realize by going through this thought process, so much clarity comes, you know, and peace of mind comes. So, thank you.
May I ask one question?
Yeah, go for it. Exactly.
And what is if you afterwards are confused? Did I do the right decision or wrong decision? So how to handle that?
It's not a question of whether you'll be confused or not. Everyone will be confused. You will be always. That's the nature of life. But that's what I'm saying. That
yeah, but even if you say like if you are kind of doubtful, okay, did I do?
Oh, you're saying, what happens if you're doubtful that you went through the process properly?
Yeah, if you did the process early and now you decided something, and I mean, if you're not secure about your situation, like or
actually, my sense is that when we actually open-heartedly go to the Vaishnavas, open-heartedly read the Shastra and try to understand what Krishna is saying, and we ask the Vaishnavas and we're ready to kind of, in our heart, when we're actually ready to embrace their advice, in your heart you will know that I followed the Vaishnavas. But in our hearts, when we know I didn't follow the Vaishnavas, or I kind of did follow them like 60%, then that doubt will always be there. You know what I mean? I don't know if I'm kind of explaining myself properly, but the point I'm making is that when we're fully open, we'll know it in our heart. And when we're a little bit reserved and we're still going according to our plans, then we will feel the doubts. We will feel the doubts. So if you're feeling the doubts after making a decision, then it probably means you weren't fully open to it. That's what it probably means, right? Because if after making a decision, someone has no doubt whatsoever, it means that they can look inside of their heart and say, you know, I was ready to do the opposite if they had told me. You know, so, but it's high, isn't it? It's high to be able to just follow like that, you know, on every decision. We also have our desires, we have our plans, we have our vision of life as well. And it's difficult to give it up like that. And just, so we do it incrementally, you know, like take guidance, you know, build your trust with someone. Yeah, gradually build up your reliance on Guru, Sadhu, Shastra. See, ultimately life means you got to become reliant on Guru, Sadhu, Shastra. But we can't just rely like that immediately 100% because we don't have the faith. That's the reality. We don't have faith 100%. So we have to build faith. And you build faith by investing some surrender according to what you can do. And then gradually that gives you more faith, and then you can invest more surrender, which brings more faith. And like this, you gradually build it up. But yeah, it comes to that point. It comes to the point like where Sanatana Goswami says, Madeka Bandhu, Mat Sangin, Mad Guru, Man Mahadana. He looks at the Bhagavatam and he says, the Bhagavatam is my only friend. The Bhagavatam is my constant companion. The Bhagavatam is my Guru. Because he's developed that complete reliance upon Bhagavatam, that complete realization that Bhagavatam will guide me to where I need to go in life. So that kind of faith and reliance upon Bhagavatam, whether it's the book Bhagavat or the person Bhagavat, it doesn't come automatically 100%. It needs to be something that's developed. So you can understand the wealth of a devotee by measuring the strength of their connection to Guru, Sadhu, and Shastra. The wealthiest devotees have the strongest connection to Guru, Sadhu, and Shastra. And in our life, we should ask myself, compared to 5 years ago, 10 years ago, is my connection to Guru, Sadhu, Shastra stronger than what it was 5 years ago? And then you can understand you're moving in the right direction. Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much. It's a very nice answer.
I just take this question off the chat. We should chant 16 rounds, follow 4 regs, read Prabhupada's books, but also take difficult decisions in life after diligently following the process prescribed by you. How about not taking decisions? I'm not sure. Deeptanshu, do you want to clarify your question? If you're on the mic. Okay.
Yeah. I mean, often it's so indecisive. You're so indecisive, and then you're just happy with your sadhana and just trying to, you know. I think it's perhaps referring to maybe, you know, when you're in early spiritual life, like you're saying, you're trying to go away from the realities, but you have to sort of engage with the world, and yeah, I'm sort of trying to get your point by your previous discussion and the question.
So you're saying sometimes you feel like it's better just not to make any decision and just let the material world play out like it's going to play out and just go with that.
Yeah, and also like at least materially be less sort of ambitious and not like take those decisions like that, you know, from career point of view and
You see, rather than looking at decisions as something that if you get it wrong, it will kind of mess up your life, and therefore you're trying to avoid them. Instead, we should look at decisions as an opportunity in order to serve Krishna more. So like, say, for example, so dilemmas, decisions that you have to make are not always a bad thing. They're never a bad thing. The only reason we think they're bad, dilemmas or decisions that we have to make, is because we're scared about what could go wrong. However, if you shift your mindset and start getting excited about what could go right, then you start looking at that dilemma or that decision that you have to make in a different way. You see? Like sometimes there are brahmacharis in the ashram, and then, you know, for every brahmachari, there's a decision to make. Like, shall I get married? Shall I not get married? And what our observation is over the years, that it's a decision that every brahmachari tries to avoid as much as possible. Like, you try to put that decision off because you think, oh my God, like, what if I get it wrong? You know, what if I decide to stay and then I can't make it? Or what if I decide to change and then it all goes wrong? And we get very scared about what could go wrong if I have to make that ashram decision. So we try to avoid it. But what we've noticed over the years is that if we instead coach the devotees in saying, this is a great opportunity. If you become a grahasta, there will be great opportunities. If you stay as a brahmachari, there will be great opportunities. And now, instead of being worried about what could go wrong, start getting excited about what could go right, depending on the decision that you make. And when you start going into that frame of mind, then they think like, yeah, if I stay like this, or if I change to this, then, I could do this, I could do that. And then they fully make a decision, and then they pursue it with their heart because they've got a vision of where that decision could take them in their service to Krishna. But when you're constantly thinking about what could go wrong, then even when you make a decision, you're not fully giving your heart to that decision, because in your mind you're thinking, maybe I made the wrong decision. Maybe I made the wrong decision. It's all going to go wrong. It's all going to fall apart. And then you never really do it with your heart. So it's it's an unrelated point, but related. When you go for public speaking, right? There's an adrenaline within you because, you're going to be facing people. Now, when that adrenaline comes, if in your mind you're thinking of everything that could go wrong, when you come in front of the people, you're going to feel nervous. When the adrenaline comes, in your mind, if you're thinking about everything that could go right and the amazing contribution you could make in this service, when you come in front of the people, you'll feel excited. Excitement and nervousness comes from the same physiological thing happening in your body, but it's just how you compute it according to your state of mind. So a nervous person and an excited person are basically experiencing the same chemical thing within them, but they're just computing it in a different way. And that's basically the mindset shift that we have to have when it comes to decision making. That yes, there's a certain apprehension there, but start getting excited about it, about what could go right if you make the right decision, and how much closer you could get to Krishna, and how much more service you could do for Krishna. Some thoughts.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Yes.
Thank you very much.
I think, we'll end there.
We're almost at the end of time, but before we come to that, I would briefly try to give you a last divine darshan. Let me see if this works. So I don't know if you can see this. This is a printing press set up by Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur in Cuttack. And then there is another printing press set up by Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur in the Bagh Bazar temple in Kolkata. So there you can see those printing presses are big and heavy, and they look very loud. I have never heard them, but they already look very, as if they are very loud. Anyway, that was just a brief darshan of these spiritual, spiritualized items. And yeah, next week we'll have, whom will we have? Tulsi and Pandava from Bulgaria. So from Aldenham in the UK, we'll be going to Bulgaria, to the other end of the continent. So we hope that you'll be joining us next week. And we say thank you and tusen tak and gracias and danabat to all of you. And we hope to see you soon again next time. And we hope to see Sutapa Prabhu again sometime soon with another lecture from the Bhagavad-gītā. Hare Krishna.